Take a moment to breathe before we start, because what comes next won't be easy, but it could be among the most meaningful things you ever experience. Emotional separation doesn't always arrive at the moment things end. Sometimes you're physically present, but mentally adrift. You're reaching for someone who no longer sees you, waiting for warmth, for a glance, for any small sign that they still care, and it never arrives. Yet you stay, not out of weakness, but because you believed in something, because you loved deeply, because you gave from the most honest part of who you are. But somewhere along the way, that bond stops holding you and starts suffocating you. And that's where the real struggle begins, not with them, but inside yourself. Stoic wisdom doesn't ask you to silence your emotions. It asks you to understand them and give them direction. To separate what you can change from what you cannot. To know the difference between what's yours to influence and what must be released. And above all, to understand that attachment is not the same thing as love, and that love should never require you to destroy yourself. In what follows, I won't ask you to erase someone who once mattered to you. Instead, I'll invite you to finally step out of the pain that still binds you to them. I'll walk you through 10 Stoic principles inspired by Marcus Aurelius to help you reclaim your heart, your thinking, and your life. The goal isn't to grow cold or indifferent. The goal is to return to yourself, to quiet the voice that keeps whispering that maybe they'll come back, maybe they'll become different. Because right now, it is you who will transform. Have you ever caught yourself replaying the same scenes in your mind, wondering what you should have said, how you could have acted differently, whether holding a little tighter would have kept them from walking away? The mind becomes like a theater of regret, running the same painful film on a loop. But the first step toward emotional freedom isn't found in replaying the past. It's found in accepting what is. This is where Stoic thinking speaks most clearly. Marcus Aurelius once wrote that you hold power over your mind, not over outside events. And realizing this is where strength is born. That single idea can reshape how we experience heartbreak. Because you cannot control how someone feels about you. You cannot force them to stay. You cannot rewrite the choices they made. The moment you truly accept this, not just with your mind but with your heart, you begin to set down the weight you've been carrying far too long. We often mistake letting go for surrendering, but they are entirely different things. Surrendering is what happens when you give up on life itself. Letting go is what happens when you stop fighting battles that were never yours to win. Holding on to someone who has already chosen to leave is like gripping a rope that's burning your hand. The tighter you hold, the deeper it cuts. So ask yourself why you're still trying to control something that was never yours to control. Is it fear of being alone? Is it a belief that you aren't whole without them? Is it the illusion that one final conversation will finally bring relief? Whatever it is, the cost is too great. Because the more you reach for them, the more you lose yourself. Real detachment begins with a shift in responsibility. It means telling yourself that you are only responsible for how you love, not for how they receive it. You are responsible for how you show up, not for whether they recognize your value. You are responsible for your healing, not for whether they return. That shift alone carries tremendous power. Think of a tree releasing its leaves in autumn. It doesn't hold back. It doesn't resist. It lets go, not because it has failed, but because release is part of its nature. We are not so different. People enter and leave. Feelings shift. What once felt certain becomes uncertain. It hurts, yes, but fighting what has already happened doesn't bring comfort. It only creates more suffering. Healing doesn't begin when they return. It begins the moment you stop needing them to. When someone walks away, we almost always begin remembering only the beautiful parts, the laughter, the closeness, the promises. We replay the best moments as if our heart is trying to convince us that what we lost was irreplaceable, was perfect. But memory can mislead us. Pain has a strange way of repainting the past, smoothing over the warning signs, erasing the silences, the emotional distance, the moments when you felt unseen. This is one of the deepest emotional traps. Not the person themselves, but the idea of who they were. That idea is what we hold on to. That idea is what keeps us frozen. You are no longer in love with them. You are in love with a version of them that only exists in your imagination, carefully shaped by a heart that doesn't want to release. But Stoic thinking asks us to see things as they truly are. Epictetus taught that it is not what happens to you, but how you respond to it that defines you. When we romanticize someone who caused us pain, we are responding from feeling rather than from clarity. We are choosing illusion over reality. And every time we return to that illusion, we give our energy to a ghost, one that cannot love you, cannot show up, cannot heal you. It's time to take that person off the pedestal, to stop treating them as though they were faultless when they couldn't give you what you genuinely needed. Maybe they weren't terrible people. Maybe they were simply unavailable or unaware or not built for the kind of depth you carry. But still, they left a mark. And pretending otherwise isn't courage, it's avoidance. Ask yourself this: if they regularly made you feel invisible, anxious, or inadequate, is it love you're missing? Or is it the comfort of the familiar, the fear of starting over, the longing for who you used to be when they were near? You owe yourself honesty here, because seeing clearly isn't cruelty, it's kindness. This isn't bitterness, it's protection. When you stop idealizing the past, you stop inviting it back in. You begin to see the whole picture, the joy and the pain together. And only when you see both can you truly move forward. When emotions are still raw, staying close to someone you're trying to release becomes like poison. Remaining near them, whether in person, online, or emotionally, only deepens the wound. It's like waiting for your clothes to dry while you're still standing in the rain. You keep hoping to heal, but you're still inside the storm that drenched you. The Stoics emphasized separation, not only from people, but from the impulses and illusions that cloud our judgment. Marcus Aurelius wrote that we must build our lives action by action and be at peace if each action moves us forward. But you cannot act. You cannot rebuild if your mind is still orbiting someone else's world. Emotional detachment doesn't begin with not caring. It begins with creating space. Space that clears the confusion. Space that lets you see what was real, what was projection, and what was simply never meant to last. This doesn't always mean disappearing completely, though sometimes that is necessary. It means drawing lines that protect your mental health. Stop looking at their social media. Stop reading old messages as if they hold answers. Stop feeding the habit of wondering what they're doing, who they're with, or whether they ever think of you. Every time you do, you surrender more of your focus, not to them exactly, but to the version of them that lives rent-free inside your mind. There is a kind of power that only comes back when you reclaim your attention. Clarity is born from distance. When you step back, you begin to see things you couldn't before. The things you accepted that you shouldn't have. The parts of yourself you slowly gave away. The ways you settled just to feel wanted. You begin to remember who you were before all the confusion, and more importantly, you begin to glimpse who you could become after it. We invest enormous mental energy trying to decode another person's behavior. Why did they grow distant? Why did they change? Why are they cold when they once ran warm toward you? It becomes a full-time mental occupation, trying to predict and analyze and make meaning of someone else's emotional state. But the more you focus on them, the less you understand yourself. The Stoics offered a truth that is both radical and freeing. It is not the situation that disturbs us, but our interpretation of it. You don't suffer because they moved forward. You suffer because of the story you tell yourself about their silence. You don't ache because they changed. You ache because you expected something different. It is your interpretation of events, not the events themselves, that cuts most deeply. And this is where your power lives, in mastering how you respond. When they don't reach out, you don't chase. When something they post feels like a blade in your chest, you don't collapse. When their presence in your life fades, you don't let it mean that your worth has faded too. Because their choices reflect who they are, not what you're worth. Your response is where your freedom lives. The moment you begin choosing your reaction instead of surrendering to it, you become something unreachable. This doesn't mean suppressing what you feel. It means observing your feelings from a slight distance. It means giving yourself the pause between something happening and how you respond. Breathing through the trigger instead of becoming it. Imagine the quiet dignity of someone treating you with indifference and you still choosing to carry yourself with grace. That is what emotional growth looks like, and it extends far beyond this one situation, because people will always disappoint, shift, withdraw, and surprise. If your peace depends on their behavior, your peace will always be fragile. But if your peace is rooted in your own values and responses, nothing and no one can permanently take it from you. Most of us were quietly taught that love is something we receive, something given from the outside, confirmed by someone else's attention or affection or presence. So when that love disappears, it feels like we've been emptied, like something that defined us has been stolen. But that belief, as common as it is the very thing that makes heartbreak feel like destruction. Love was never something you had to chase. It was something you carried inside you all along. The Stoics taught that virtue, living with reason and integrity, is the highest good. And genuine love is virtuous. It doesn't demand or manipulate or reduce you. It's something you express through your values, not something you beg for through someone else's validation. When you love someone who cannot love you back, your definition of love is put to the test. If love for you is a transaction, existing only when returned, then their distance will feel devastating. But if love is something you give not to be repaid, but to remain true to your own heart, then even when it isn't returned, it doesn't hollow you out, because you offered something real and they simply weren't capable of holding it. Redefining love doesn't make you cold. It means you can love without needing to possess. It means you can say honestly that you showed up fully, gave what you had, and can now walk away with your dignity still intact. If your sense of worth depends on being chosen by someone else, then your worth is always at risk. But if your worth is defined by the depth and honesty with which you love, it remains untouchable even in rejection. So many people remain emotionally suspended, not because love is still alive, but because they were never truly seen, and they want that person to return just to confirm that what they felt was real. But what if it already was real? What if the fact that you loved with your whole self is already enough? What if the closure you've been waiting for isn't a final conversation, but a new understanding of what love truly means? The love you gave was not lost. It was evidence that your heart is alive and capable of something rare. Now give that love to the one who needs it most, yourself. There is a dangerous illusion we fall into after loss, the idea that because it still hurts, it must still mean something, that the ache in your chest is proof of a bond that cannot be broken, that pain is a sign of depth, of love, of a chapter that isn't truly closed. But what if pain isn't a sign of connection? What if it's a sign of resistance? What if it has less to do with them and more to do with your own reluctance to release the story you've been telling yourself? The mind is drawn to meaning. When someone we care about disappears from our lives, we scramble to fill the emptiness. And because silence is unbearable, we make the pain feel sacred. We say things like, "I still feel this way because what we had was real." But real love shouldn't imprison you in sadness. Real connection doesn't survive on suffering. If the only thing keeping them alive in your heart is your grief, then what you're carrying isn't love. It's a wound. Epictetus taught us to look beneath surface emotions and understand their deeper workings. You can accept what happened, or you can resist it. Pain is unavoidable, but how you interpret that pain, the stories you build around it, is where your freedom begins or ends. Some people remain emotionally attached for years, not because love is still present, but because the pain has become familiar. They wrap their identity around heartbreak. They grow afraid of who they'd be without it. That's not connection. That's captivity. It's forgetting that you're allowed to feel something completely and still choose to release it. Ask yourself honestly, are you still in love, or are you simply addicted to missing them? Because longing can become a habit, and if you allow it, sadness becomes confused with meaning. You start to believe that moving forward would somehow dishonor what you felt. But it is the opposite. Releasing is not betrayal. It is the deepest form of respect for yourself, for what was, and for what deserves to come next. When someone leaves, it is easy to feel like the story is over, not just for the relationship, but for you entirely. You grieve not only them, but the version of yourself that existed while they were present. And in that fog, we make a quiet error. We begin living backward, looking over our shoulders, comparing, replaying, wondering. But healing doesn't happen in reverse. It begins the moment you turn your eyes from who walked away to who you are in the process of becoming. Stoicism isn't about burying feeling, it's about channeling it, and that channel should always point toward your values, your clarity, your evolution. Marcus Aurelius wrote that we should waste no more time asking what a good person looks like, but simply be one. The same principle applies here. Stop wondering what the relationship could have been. Start becoming the person who no longer needs it. Pain has a strange power to reveal what truly matters. It strips away pretense and forces us to face the parts of ourselves we neglected while loving someone else. Maybe you set aside your passions to keep them comfortable. Maybe you made yourself smaller to give them more room. Maybe you gave so consistently that you can no longer remember what it feels like to receive. That is not failure. That is awakening. Because they may have left your life, but the lesson did not. That lesson contains the blueprint for who you are becoming, someone wiser, more self-aware, more grounded. But you cannot meet that version of yourself while you are still chasing someone who is already gone. So ask yourself what you will build now. Not for revenge, not to prove a point, but because the time and energy you gave to them now belongs entirely to you. There comes a moment when you have to ask yourself a difficult question. Am I still attached to this person, or am I attached to the story I invented about them? Sometimes we don't stay because the relationship was extraordinary. We stay because the fantasy felt safer than confronting reality. We hold on not to who they were, but to who we needed them to become, to who we believed they might one day be. But hope that is disconnected from reality becomes a kind of prison, and if you aren't careful, you'll spend years attempting to relive something that never fully existed. The Stoics would remind you that reality is your ally and illusion is your adversary. Marcus Aurelius pressed himself daily to live in accordance with how things actually are, not how he wished they were. That is what emotional freedom demands. The courage to look your fantasy directly in the eye and let it dissolve. To acknowledge that they weren't ready, that they didn't show up, that their silence communicated more than any explanation ever could. Freedom isn't found in waiting, it's found in release. When you live inside a fantasy, you place your entire life on hold. You wait for messages that will not arrive. You reimagine conversations that never took place. You dream of a version of them that exists nowhere except inside your mind. But real life is moving forward without you. While you remain still, frozen in longing, your future is quietly knocking at a door you've been too distracted to open. Choosing freedom doesn't promise that the pain vanishes overnight. It means deciding, finally, that your reality, with all of its grief and healing and raw truth, is better than a perfect lie. It means accepting the ending, even without the beautiful conclusion you imagined. It means choosing to be present over remaining lost in possibility. Ask yourself what this fantasy has truly cost you. How many peaceful nights? How many clear mornings? How much of your confidence and vitality have you spent pursuing someone who wasn't even looking back in your direction? And more importantly, what might you be creating, growing, building if you finally chose to let go? You are not here to live inside what might have been. You are here to live in what is, and to build something genuinely beautiful from it. That begins the very moment you stop asking whether they will return and begin asking what your life looks like when you no longer need them to. Letting go doesn't erase the past. It doesn't pretend you were never hurt or that you never loved. It means choosing stillness over chaos. It means standing inside your pain and still deciding that you deserve more than this confusion. It means honoring what once was, while releasing what no longer belongs to who you are now becoming. The Stoic tradition was never about suppressing emotion. It was about directing it, giving it purpose, channeling it into something greater, into growth, into inner strength, into quiet stillness, and most of all, into freedom. Because at the end of everything, the real measure isn't whether someone loved you back. The real measure is whether you can still love yourself after they didn't. So if you are here today, still hurting, still wondering, still quietly hoping for a sign or a change, let this remind you that you are not broken. You are in the middle of becoming. Every time you choose truth over illusion, presence over longing, self-worth over the exhaustion of chasing, you are not simply moving on, you are rising. This is your turning point, not when they come back, but when you do.